Good evening. I would like to call to order the Kaiser Long Range Planning Task Force for Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Matthew Stallheim.
Here.
Melissa Martin.
Here.
Elaine Wilson.
Here.
Jane Erb.
Here.
Lori Christopher.
They're coming.
Susan London. Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Kathy Clark.
Here.
Council President Starr.
Here.
Councilor Reed.
Also coming.
Councilor Dran.
Here.
Councilor Cross.
Here.
Councilor Kohler.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. One of the things we don't like to hear is we've always done it this way, so tonight we can't say that because this is the first time that we have added an additional meeting for the Long Range Planning Task Force midway through the year. So thank you all for asking for that. It's an opportunity to bring us up to speed on ongoing changes with our budget, how the forecasts are going. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city assistant city manager and finance director, Mr. Tim Wood.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here.
Just waiting for the flying chairs now.
Wasn't expecting that, so that was exciting.
The larger screen becomes more important to me every year.
I would have to admit I'm about ready to go get some bifocals, so I've noticed that there's certain areas that I just don't see anymore, especially at night, so I'm with you. It's not in the budget, so I'm hoping that Santa Claus brings it. Anyway, as Mayor Clark was saying, this is the first time that we've had a first quarter financial update. So bear with us. This is going to be an evolving process if we decide to continue on with this. I'm sure there's some things that you folks may want me to cover in the future, and I'm more than willing to add to the presentation as we go forward. So this is just the initial kickoff, and we can kind of see how this goes. But again, thank you for coming out. Some of the things to bear in mind when we do look at the presentation is we're not really set up to do quarterly financial reviews just yet. So we're kind of building this stuff out as we go. There's quite a few things that we only do entries once a year at the end of the year. So if some things kind of look a little bit funny, that may be the reason for that. However, I'll try to point those out as we go along. Also, we're still not wrapped up with our year-end financial audit, so there may be some carryover things from last year that may have some impact for this year. However, with that, we're going to go ahead and give it our old college try and see how the first quarter went.
Can I press pause for a moment because apparently I forgot something because I went right into the meat of the work, and I forgot to ask for approval of the minutes from the February 26, 2024 Long Range Planning Task Force.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilor Starr, Council President Starr, a second by Councilor Kohler to approve the minutes as presented. And I didn't ask if there were any additions or corrections noted. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you for pausing for that. And we can proceed.
Okay, so tonight we're going to do a citywide overview. We're going to look at the general operating fund, which is our most constrained fund. And then we'll take a quick look at all of the enterprise funds and then some of the larger projects that we have in process. And then I'll give you folks some time to ask any questions, and I'll see if Adam can answer them for you.
That's called teamwork, isn't it?
I'm kidding there. So moving on to page 3, this is the citywide overview, and this is one of the few times that I've collapsed all of the financial funds of the city together for one snapshot. I thought it'd be interesting just to see where, on a quarterly basis, where we land. So for the first quarter, ending September 30th, we did bring in $8,344,538. That is very consistent with previous years. In the last year, we brought in $7,385,000. So we've had some indexing of some of the revenues that we've received. Plus, we've had a few one-off kind of revenues. Specifically, the biggest impact driving that increase is Marion County gave us some money for our turf field. So you're seeing that driving up some of the intergovernmental revenues. If you look back at 2020, 22, 23, we got 11,207,000. That big jump up is because we received some ARPA funding that year. We got about $4 million. So that's the big changes as we go through time as far as our revenues go. From an expense standpoint, we had $10,436,000 in expenses, leaving us upside down. We actually had a loss of $2,091,000. That's not uncommon for the city, given our revenue stream and when we actually receive revenues. If you look back at 23, 24, we brought in 7.4 million, spent 9.7 million. So we actually reduced our loss by a little bit. So the previous year we had a loss of 2.3-ish million. So with our beginning fund balance at the bottom, we started off the year with $27,510,000. And at the end of the first quarter, because of the $2 million loss, we dropped down to $25,418,000. Like I say, that's intentional. That's just based upon how the revenues flow. We received quite a bit of our main revenues in November, which I'll explain a little bit later. So that's really the highlights of the citywide overview of all the funds lumped together. This would not necessarily be a standard report that we would produce. There's a lot of things in here that we have some transfers and stuff that we don't record until the end of the year. So this really I would not consider this to be a generally accepted accounting principle kind of picture, but it does give us some information and can kind of show off some trends at a very large standpoint.
Pause for questions.
Sure.
So, Councilor Cross,
Well, question and a comment. Would it be possible if we do this again? It would be.
microphone, please.
Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It would be super helpful. I mean, you all can weigh in if there were some percentages by here instead of trying to calculate in my head. Because if I saw, okay, we've gone through 22% or 30% on that, just to look at that.
I can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Moving on to page 4. So what we're trying to present here is the current year revenues and compare that to the average of the past 3 years, just to give us a little bit of trending as far as how do our revenues come in during the year and how do we compare to previous years. So we have the green line, which is the 3-year average, which extends out for the rest of the year. And you can kind of see there's a couple step ups in November and then in June. The November step up in revenues, that's when we actually received the majority of our property taxes. So this time of year, as a finance director, I'm always a little nervous because we're spending more than we actually took in. And we're hoping that we're going to catch up starting November through the end of the year. In June, like I indicated before, we have a bunch of year-end transactions that we record. And to be consistent with the previous years, that's how we'll end up doing it again this year. So we have a bunch of transfers where we're moving funds around between the different areas just to cover some the budgeted transfers that we have for each year. So as far as the current year goes...
Press pause if we could. Council President Starr has a question.
I'll wait until he's done with this page, or are you moving on to page 5?
I have a couple more points, but...
Then I'll wait till he's done. Sorry, I thought he was moving on.
Okay.
So for the first 3 months, July, August, September, as far as our revenues go compared to the average of the past 3 years, we appear to be a little bit behind. That's because a couple of those years we got 4.4 million in ARPA funds. So it's going to take a couple of years for those ones to roll off, and then you'll see our pattern go back to a much more linear type of pattern. The other item I'd like to highlight is in June, you can see that we actually go over 100% of our budgeted revenues. That's one of the ways that we try to have moderate assumptions within our budgeting process. We try not to get super aggressive and be under, because the ramifications of being under on our revenues and over on our expenses can be fairly significant for a government agency. We want to operate more like airplane maintenance rather than car maintenance. You can afford to get a flat tire every once in a while on a car. You don't really want to get a flat tire on an airplane very often. So our ability to provide services is really what we're aiming for with a lot of our budgeting process. So we don't really want to get into cutting the corners, especially when it comes to things like our water system, stormwater, sewer, those kind of things. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
You just answered it. There we go. Meeting of the minds. All right, anybody else with a question? All right.
So same kind of thing as we look at our expenses. For the year, you can kind of see it's a very, very consistent pattern as it goes up. And again, probably to address this, we don't spend all of our budgeted items. There's things like contingencies, ending fund balance, those kind of things that we need to set aside and not use up all of our resources that are available. That's by design. Typically within our enterprise funds, that's the water, sewer, stormwater, we try to have at least 60 days cash available on hand. So that takes up some of the budgeted amounts that we aren't actually going to spend until the next year. Within the general fund, we do try to have 15% of our current revenues set aside. And we don't spend that amount even though we appropriate it as ending fund balance. So that's why you're not going to see our expenses get all the way to 100% of whatever we budget. And that's consistent with every year that I've been here since the beginning of time. So as we look at the July, August, September, you can see July, we are a little bit behind our average, although we catch up in August and September. That's largely because of capital projects. We had the turf field, some significant expenses there. We've also had pickleball courts going in, so we had expenses there. Then we also had some police vehicles. So really the capital outlay is what's driving up our numbers earlier in the year as compared to having those out farther into the year. And with that, I'd be free to address any questions.
Councilor Kohler?
Thank you. My question was, where did we end up on all our funding for the pickleball courts? Where did all the funding come from? Did some of it come from parks, just where did it all come from?
A majority of it was park SDCs.
And then didn't we have some grants of some kind or gift of some kind for it too?
I don't recall any grants for the pickleball courts themselves. And we had appropriated those, I believe, through the park SDC funds.
Mr. Lawyer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The pickleball courts were funded through parks operations fees and parks systems development charges. No grant funds at all.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
So moving on to expenses, doing a little bit deeper dive, citywide overall, staffing. You can see throughout time, we've never actually been fully staffed for a lot of reasons. Historically, the biggest has been turnover. When someone leaves and they're paid out 400 hours of vacation time, which is kind of the max that someone can accrue. Historically, we've had to wait 10 weeks before we could actually backfill that position. I do appreciate the Budget Committee and you folks giving us some of the ARPA funds so that we didn't have to wait that time period after people leave to be able to backfill. That's been pretty instrumental for us as far as getting, say, the city attorney, HR director, city recorder, a few of those kind of positions, police officers, that kind of a thing. Get that process started sooner rather than later. And I think we've had some very successful transitions. So like I say, we've never been fully staffed. We've always been a little bit under. Right now we have a slew of positions that we're still hiring for. We have a lot of officer positions open. We did just hire 2, and they're sworn in at the last city council meeting. We have a handful, I guess 2 or 3 more that are in the pipeline as far as the background process goes. So I would anticipate we'll have some more additions here in the near future. We also, our environmental group, which is part of the Stormwater Fund, we've also had some fairly significant staffing shortages there as well. So Stormwater, environmental group, and police is really where we've been hurting the most as far as staffing goes. And once we get those, you'll be able to see that 2020, the 2024, 25, see those lines get a little bit closer as we go through time. But you can just tell, especially during the pandemic period, we had a significant spread between what we budgeted and what the actual FTE was.
Questions? Ms. Christopher?
So why so many in the environmental area? Are they retirements? Do people move on?
It's
going on?
it's a very technical area, and I think a lot of the folks have moved on to, better positions throughout. So at this point, it's not necessarily retirements, it's just there's a lot of opportunities for folks in that area.
Okay.
So Ms. Wilson brings up a good question on the number of officers, and I'm going to look to Chief, if I may, talk about what's happening with the, people are figuring out this retirement thing. Is that the main driver, or what are some of the other drivers for the ongoing process with additional hires?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Budget Committee. That's a great mic. We have, that is not fun.
Oh,
Too far away. There we go. I think that's better, maybe. I don't know.
it's just your voice echoes.
It must.
Yeah.
No, it's a process to get someone hired on, and we put out several job offers over the last year. Some got kicked out because of the psych. Some got kicked out because of, in the background phase, we found out they're just not a good fit for us. We do have 4 contingent offers out there right now. One is a lateral from Colorado, who would love to have. She has many options, and so she's exploring those options here in Oregon. And then we have another lateral from a close agency nearby. I won't give it up yet. And so we're just waiting for the backgrounds to get done on those, and they just take a while depending on references and different things like that. We had a couple people leave unexpectedly as well. One went to Salem, one went to the Department of Justice as a special investigator, and then retirements as well. So obviously had a couple people retire, and then you guys gave us the funding to hire on, and we just got behind on people leaving and coming, and anyway, and then we have just one leaving this December, James Young. He'll be here for 30 years, but he's on that retire hire back program, the old one, and then we'll have a couple join the new one once it starts in January. So does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
which was, the answer I think was all of the above. Any other questions on that? Oh, yes, follow up for Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. So when you talk about contingency with some officers, what is your timeline or time frame? Like, okay, you have those officers potentially. Is this something then you're looking at 2 months, 3 months? Do you have a?
From application process to when we hire them on,
Yes.
it can be anywhere, it's about 3 to 4 months.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think that's really important for folks to understand, that this is an ongoing thing. If folks are watching city council meetings and they're seeing people sworn in and so forth, so it really helps get the information out into the community about how our police force staffing is evolving and the personnel is changing and why. Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Copeland, when you have those contingent offers, when they accept and you have an established start date, kind of a 2-part question. From the time they accept to when they start, how long is that? Then once they're here and on their first day, what's the timeline to when they're in a car on their own?
Yeah, so from the time we do a contingent offer that's based off of the background, the psych, and a physical. So once they accept the offer, then we start the background. And that can take anywhere from a month to 2 months. And then it's just plain, once they get past that, then scheduling the psych and the physical goes pretty quick. And then it's just a matter of working with them and their other employer to figure out a start date. Usually, once we get everything done, we're within 4 weeks of like, hey, I need to give my employer 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And so we're about a month there. And then once we hire them on, if they are lateral, it's about a month. We can put them in a car with a training officer, and they go through about 14 evaluated shifts as a lateral. If you're a brand new cop, we hire you on, try and get you a couple weeks before the academy, get acclimated to Kaiser, get to know who they are, let them ride around in the cars for a little bit, and then it's a 16-week academy. And then they go into a field training program, which is about 4 months. So they'll ride with 3 different training officers, each about 14 evaluated shifts with each training officer, and then come back and ride with the original training officer on phase 1 to see all the progress they've made. We call that phase 4, kind of the checkout phase. So it's about 10 months total, once you get them on, hired on, and they're being paid by us, before they're really actually useful to us as a solo officer in a car.
They're useful from day one.
Oh, yeah. No, they're great, but it does take a process, and
Yeah.
some take a little bit longer, and some are faster. It's just about the learning process and how fast we can get them through.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right, any other questions? Counselor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick follow-up on, once we get them, are they pretty much here, or do we have a lot of, I mean, you mentioned the psych and you mentioned the other thing, but that's before we hire them, right? So once we hire them, are we pretty solid that they stay?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, it would take, some major catastrophe for them to leave, but we really do try to make sure that we're going to be able to get them through the training process before we hire them on. Some, very few, just don't make it. And it's unfortunate, but most of them stay.
All right, anything else on that one? Great questions. So, yes, back to Mr. Wood.
Just as a warm-up for the budget season, in the lower right bottom corner, we have the CPI indexes that we follow and the cost of living adjustments, just the historical patterns. Right now, we are trending towards a 2.6% CPI increase for calendar year 2024. We obviously have 2 more data points to collect, but that seems to be the general area. So I would anticipate when we start talking at budget time, the CPI will be probably 2.6 to 3%, somewhere in that range, just to kind of prime that up. As far as what we do know already, for the 2 unions, we have agreements in place for both of those. I guess we have 3 unions with 1 kind of in process still, but for the ones that we do know, the KPA has a 3.5% cost of living increase, and then the local 737, which is the public works, they have a range of 1% to 4%. So whatever the CPI ends up being, that's what the public works group will end up getting. So with that, any additional questions?
I saw it coming. Counselor Cross?
Leave me alone, sorry. Thank you. Just curious, for history's sakes, I know like in 2008, a lot of businesses had wage freezes. Has there ever been, and I've heard about other cities doing wage freezes, has there ever been a wage freeze here in Kaiser?
Yes, there has been. I believe it was 2000,
Long?
Yeah.
8.
must have been 8 or 2009-ish, somewhere in that time period. It must have been 2009, 2010, I think, we had a 2-year period where we didn't do anything.
Not that I'm saying anything about it. Great job, Mr. Road. I was just curious for historical knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a time period that economically we hope we never have to go through again. So that was the housing bubble bursting, if I remember correctly, so. And also was the nexus of the Long Range Planning Task Force, because that was started under Mayor Christopher to get us together to figure out what are we going to do, and got all of us together to talk about how we're going to prioritize and get through that, and it's turned out to be so useful. Here we are today. Still using this tool for more constructive and more positive economic purposes, however. We don't want to repeat that. Okay, we good?
So moving on to page 7, this is the general fund specific to itself. This also includes the park fund and the police services fee funds. So our auditors kind of make us collapse all of those together because they are pretty much funded by the same sources. So for this, again, total resources for the year, we got $1,639,000. That is pretty comparable to the previous 2 years, so not a lot of excitement there. When you jump down to expenditures, however, we had $3,888,000. So again, you can see our loss is 2.9 million-ish. That always gives me a little bit of pause every year as we go through time. And that's why we need that 15% ending fund balance. We're using that cash to get us until November. And that's when you'll see this, again, the significant intake of cash coming at us as we collect the property taxes. That 2.8 million is fairly consistent with the previous years. It's up a little bit. The primary reason, again, is capital outlay. You can see we had a pretty big spike in the capital outlay. And again, this is the parks. So we're really looking at pickleball right now. So the price of pickleball. Let's see. So back when we had all of the funds combined, the loss was about $2 million. And now this is 2.8 million. So the enterprise funds, the other ones, are kind of offsetting the loss when you collapse it all together a little bit. Having said that, though, we can't use the enterprise funds. We can't use the water fees, the stormwater, or the sewer fees to offset anything in the general fund. That would be kind of an orange jumpsuit event for me if we started doing that kind of stuff. And that would be bad.
I'm going to go to Council President Starr for a question.
Are you done?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, so now that we have our first quarter kind of in the book, so to speak, and I know you mentioned that expense or the net loss estimated right under budget that we have on the books. Do you do kind of financial modeling taking to project out? Because you said the 15% ending fund balance. Do we do any financial modeling after the first quarter of every fiscal year to kind of figure out like how long are we going to be able to maintain that before we have to look at other potential kind of funding gap measures?
That's a good question. Typically not after the first quarter. Typically end of November. That's really when I start to get my radar up just to see how we're doing. It is kind of important to get the first round of quarterly franchise fees in the books, and we typically see those in October. And then that's followed up with property taxes in November. Once we get those two components, you can start to paint the picture of what the rest of the year will look like, and then based off of that, I can project into the future fairly well.
I have a follow-up.
Follow-up?
But I'm looking more for trying to predict if we will get to a scenario where we won't have the contingency money, enough contingency money to get us through the first 3 months of the year. That's what I'm asking about. Do we know like how long we will be able to hold that contingency, that 15% back? Because I think for us to think we can do that forever, I mean, while that might be ideal, I don't know if that's going to be reality forever. So do we do that kind of financial modeling?
I would say yes, loosely right now. We did, through the budget process, we're intentionally using up some of our ending fund balance. So I am closely monitoring that as we go through time because, well, here, the beginning fund balance was $5,713,000 at the very bottom. And you can see we get to 2.8 million. Just off the cuff, I would be having a panic attack if I didn't know that the property taxes were coming. So to the extent that we stick to our budget, we know we're going to be reducing that ending fund balance with the anticipation of getting us to 28, 29, when we know the LID is going away and we're going to have an infusion of cash at that point. So to answer your question, yes, we are keeping an eye on it. Do I have a formal analysis that I do? No.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Good questions. Okay, Mr. Wood?
So moving on to page 8, this is really where you see the property taxes coming into play. We got nothing for July, August, September, a little bit of something in October, and then boom, all of our revenues coming in November. The little bit of hit in October, that is our franchise fees the first quarter. So you can kind of see how that compares to, the other revenues. If you look at the chart on the very right, the pie, our taxes and assessments, which are primarily the property taxes, that makes up 40% of the general fund revenues. I mean, that's a big nut to swallow. License and fees, which includes the police fee and the parks fee, make up another 29.8%. And then I almost feel like the rest of them are like rounding. While they're significant, they just don't drive the bus as far as making a big impact. And again, in the general fund, consistent with the overall view, we do collect more than 100%. So the excitement this year for me, if we turn the page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Reed?
Thank you. Is now a good
Sure,
break?
go.
Okay. Okay, I'm just, okay,
excitement.
with the licensing and fees being such a big chunk of the budget, I know that, with technology changing and so forth and the licensing structure and so forth, are there things that we need to be especially cognizant of in terms of, as the council is setting policy on these things? Just not to go in a place where we're going to take such a huge hit on that particular
Sure.
section.
That's a good question. That is one of the few areas where we do have levers that the council and the budget committee can pull. So that's something where we'll need to keep our eye on it and make sure that we're, while being fiscally responsible with folks' money, we need to make sure that we're able to provide the services that the community is looking for. So on a I guess, a micro basis, when we look at the police parks fees, we're going to need to make sure those are adequate. The other license and fees, we are currently taking, so all of the franchise fees, electric, garbage, those kind of things. We are kind of at the maximum that we can charge by state statute. Like I say, there's a few levers in there that we can pull, but yeah, we do need to keep our eye on those.
Follow up.
Follow up?
So I especially know that, the trash haulers are coming up for, annual inspection and a change in the policy and so forth. If you could just kind of remind us of this big chunk when we have those conversations, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay.
I've got one more question, myself, and that is, so where in this pie is the revenues from our cash crop of marijuana?
That would be, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but it's in taxes and assessments.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll find it under taxes and assessments.
I believe
Okay.
it's the city's only sales tax.
Yes. All right, thank you.
And it really hasn't done super well for us. I think we're only expecting about 150 to 160,000 a year. When we first came out of the gate, we were actually looking closer to 300,000, and then Measure 110 kind of clawed some of that back for us.
Yeah. And with a follow-up on that was with Measure 110, so what you're talking about is both the 3% sales tax that is levied by the city of Kaiser, and that's the limitation set by Measure 92, if I remember correctly, or 91 to whatever that was. And then the revenue sharing is being shared less because of Measure 110, and those are all combined into one line item?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And we would like to encourage the legislature to share the city portion again. Okay, Council President Starr? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Christopher.
So, so the city had the city levied 3%, or the state did that in addition, okay. there's revenue sharing for pot, and then the city had the option of levying an additional 3%.
I think it's higher than 3%, but
Mr. Lindsay?
okay.
Madam
Mr.
Mayor,
Lindsay?
I believe the city at the time had the foresight to actually put a higher rate in, but the state capped it at 3%.
Correct.
So I believe it's 10% for the city of Kaiser, but that it can't go higher than what the state allows.
That is
In
correct.
addition to the revenue sharing.
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. So the city got ahead of it before the measure passed. Was it 92? So we passed the 10% sales tax and also time, manner, and place so that when 92 passed, we were prepared for it. And we talked about whether we should change our ordinance back to what the state cap is, but the city council has chosen to leave it in place in case the state-imposed cap is removed, then we're ready to collect more revenues if we're able to. So, yeah, we did both. Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we know that there was, right, with the measure 110, there was revenue diverted, right? Now that we've repealed some of that, or the legislature has repealed some of that, I think some people might be wondering, do we get some of that back? And I know the answer, I think, I'm sure, but I just want everybody to know that just because that might have been, that was repealed, that doesn't mean we are getting any back. Correct?
That is correct.
Right.
That appears to be the right answer.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to make
Trick or
sure.
treat, and we got the treat, or
Yeah,
the trick.
we all
got the
were
trick.
aware of that. Thank
Yes.
you.
Mr. Brown?
And to add, to just give a little bit more clarity to that, the state tax is at 17%, and the revenue sharing was 10% of the state share, which would equate to 1.7%.
Wait, what?
So local governments got 10%.
Of the 17%?
17%.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the time that Measure 110 passed, the state was collecting about $45 million in revenue sharing to pass out. And Measure 110, I think, put the cap at $10 to $11 million that was available for revenue sharing. So they took 3/4 of the local government revenue sharing from every city and county in the state,
It went.
which is about $35 million.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So it's really not 17%? Because they took some of that 17%, they said 17% would be available for revenue sharing, and then they took back, and so what is actually available for revenue sharing? What percentage?
So it would be less than 1%.
They took
Probably about
16% back?
0.6%. So 10% of 17% equals 1.7%.
Got it?
So if you take a quarter of 1.7%,
Yeah.
that's what we get.
No.
The rest of it is state tax.
No. It was, well, and to, Mr. Thompson asked me a good question, is was that in Measure 110? And the answer is no. If the legislature chose to fund the programs that were delineated in Measure 110 by using that source of the revenue, not the state's share of the revenue. And that was a discussion that was had by the legislature and passed by the legislature, even though there was heavy lobbying on the part of cities and counties to say, no, these need to be funded through the state programming dollars. They took it out of our hide. Did I put that strongly enough? You don't have, yeah, that was very, very frustrating. So I didn't mean to open that kettle of fish, but it is a question that we do get, and it's important to know where those dollars are and where they aren't. Are there any other questions on this pie before we go to pecan or pumpkin or apple? It's Thanksgiving time, right? Okay, let's go to the next page.
So a little bit of good news. Every October, usually around the middle to end of October, Marion County sends out what they assess the value of Kaiser at. We typically budget a 3% increase in assessed value. It actually came back at 3.5% this year. So that when we do the math, everything, it rolls down to $32,859. So we're going to get about that much more than what we had originally budgeted for. And again, this is part of why when we look at our revenues, we tend to collect a little bit more than 100% of what we budget. So this is some good news for us.
Councilor Reed has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I know one of the options for paying property taxes is that you can do it in 3 different chunks. Does that affect our budget, and how can you plan for that, not really knowing who's going to pay in full and who's going to pay chunks?
That is a good question. We typically budget a 5% haircut based off of people who pay early, so we never see those dollars. That's kind of the ballpark that Marion County has given us to work from. So we may see some additional pickup if folks end up paying over the 3 payment periods.
So that is shown in these graphs as far as 3 different.
Correct.
So the first payment period is November, second
Correct.
January, and third May or something? Okay, thank you.
Really, vast majority of it is November. The other 2 payment periods are pretty insignificant in comparison.
Thank you.
Ms. Christopher?
So my question is, as you start to prepare the budget for the next year, and you're preparing a base budget, you go with what you know what we spent in 2024 from January till December. You'll have that information available to you the first part of 2025. You know we're getting 3.5%. So isn't the base budget, this is what we spent, here's the additional money we know we're getting in, that's our base budget. Is that where we start?
That would be correct for the following year, yep.
Okay. So that seems pretty easy.
Mr. Stallheim?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Simple question, is the 23 and 2024 tax revenue, is that in 2024 real dollars?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Doing a little bit deeper dive, the next piece is the license and fees. So this can kind of put in proportion, and again, I'll add some percentages to this next go around. You can see that the police and the park services fee, the 2 and 3 from the bottom, that really makes up the majority of the license and fees that we're receiving right now. We have a little bit that we collect on water, sewer, stormwater, but we haven't seen anything yet from the franchises. That's why I'm saying October is kind of a critical period, October, November, when we get that first glimpse of how things are going.
Wait a minute.
Council President Starr, question?
Yeah. So we get that in October, but these figures are as of the end of
These are as of the end of September.
Right,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
So as we look at these, the water sales assessment, we're actually down 1.5%. That's really people conserving. I think they've taken to heart my call to save water. They're a little bit early, but that's okay. I'll go with it. The sewer license fee, that is a 2% increase. That's based off of the rate increase that the Salem passed along to us January 1st, 2024. They're actually meeting tonight to go over what our rate increase will look like for next year. At this point, I anticipate it's going to be about 5%, but I'll tell you tomorrow.
I'm going to go Councilor Kohler and then Ms. Christopher.
So, Mr. Wood, what was what did Salem want to increase that?
Well, we went with the staff recommendation. However, some of the other folks that were part of the task force wanted to go 6-7% range, more than what actually the Salem staff was requesting. So I think we did a fairly good job of striking first and locking in a fairly decent rate for all things considered.
Thank you, Councilor Kohler, and Mr. Wood for being on the task force to be our voice. for reasonable, reasonable rates, and that the staff, sounds like they, gave numbers that were based in hard reality. So thank you for that. Ms. Christopher?
So you just said they're meeting tonight. Who's meeting tonight?
The Salem City Council, they're meeting to approve the rate schedule for next year, and that includes the pass-through charges to the city of Kaiser.
And that's not this 2%?
That would have been, well, they meet every 2 years, so this would have been the meeting that they had 2 years ago this time.
What?
So the 2% that you're looking at,
Yeah.
that is the annualized impact of a rate increase that happened January 1, 2024.
And what are they doing tonight? It's for 25?
Correct, yeah.
And so were you and Counselor Kohler involved in that discussion for 25 rates?
Correct.
And that's the 2%?
That'll be 5%. So effective January 1, 2025.
Am I the only one confused about this?
No, it's for January 1, 25, of 25.
Okay, so you guys negotiated what at 2%? 24?
That would have been the 2024 rate increase, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Counselor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was an interesting process because there were some people in the room that wanted that to increase up to 15%. And
And that's a huge number.
it was some huge numbers, and it was fun at the last minute to just make a motion and do this, and we just kind of snuck it in at 5. So we felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, but it sounds like they're getting in 25. We saved us a little bit in 24.
10%.
Wow. Well, thank you for making sure that we had a voice at the table on that. Counselor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So whatever Salem pushes through, we just push through to the citizens of Kaiser?
Typically, we have to go through our own process, so.
So what is that
in-
process? Going before the city council?
In December, yep. In December, we'll be bringing the rate increase recommended by Salem. And, we could choose to do something different, although we're still gonna have to pay Salem the dollar amount, so.
I understand that. I was on council when that happened 2 years ago, so I was just trying to wrap my head around that part. I didn't know if we just, whoop, here's the baby.
Yeah, no, we can't impose the new fee until the council adopts it.
Okay, and when, okay.
Okay. And, historically, we also worked very hard, and this is going to the administration under Mayor Christopher, where Salem used to charge us an additional 7% just because they could. And then negotiated a ratchet down of that 1% per year over 7 years to get it down to, we pay the same rate as the residents of Salem, but the outlying areas still pay that surcharge, I understand. I think that's still there, but I know we don't anymore. And I definitely want to give credit to Ms. Christopher and to also, I believe, Counselor Moyer.
Yes, it was, yes,
She drove that conversation home
correct.
and made sure that happened, that we would be treated equally with the city of Salem. I'm gonna go to Counselor Reed and back to Counselor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I feel like it's always super important when we have these discussions to remind people that our water and sewer bills are bi-monthly. So because of that, it seems like a huge, I mean, it's basically 10%, but you're really only paying 5% a month. So it seems higher than it is because we're billed every other month. So I feel like we can't really say that enough because we hear it from people, and people's water and sewer bills are expensive, and there's going to be with this increase, it will look like twice as much as it is, but again, it's bi-monthly. So I just want to take that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, it still adds up, but I think it's really important to remind people that they are paying it every other month, but
It feels
you have
like
to
a
save.
lot, because it's a
yeah.
lot.
And you have to save up. Some people are better at budgeting and saving up month over month, or they can't. And that's a difficulty that people are put into. I'm gonna go to Counselor Cross, then I'll come back to Counselor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that most definitely some people just can't afford it. So I think they probably know they're paying it every other month because they probably like the month that they're not paying it on. My question is, just so I know for future reference, when you, Mr. Wood and Councilor Kohler are working on this, is there ever an opportunity as a council to write a letter opposing or as a group, sending a letter to Salem City Council and the councilors? Saying, hey, right now, with the economy the way it is, this is our recommendation, or do we just go with status quo?
That's a good question. I mean, there's always opportunities. I mean, you can always go to the Salem Council meeting when they're having their public hearing, so there's that opportunity. As far as writing
But I guess
a
if we
specific
didn't
letter,
know, then how would we know? If you guys are the one representing us?
good question. I suppose at the task force level, we could solicit council's input.
Great idea.
Good idea, yeah, maybe we'll add that to our council stuff at the end of it. Thank you.
Well, just to kind of follow on that with Councilor Kohler being our appointed representative, so it's an opportunity to bring back to council during the process. And I believe you did report to council during our council reports at the end of the meeting that they had been at the task force and the work that they were doing. So if there's going to be something that they feel they need the extra support from city council, like a letter or something like that, that's a great time for our liaisons, because that's what, that's what we send our liaisons to go do, to bring it back, saying, I need some extra oomph to drive this home.
Yeah, and I love all the work Councilor Kohler does, so I appreciate all that. That's more if we need to get behind our residents of Kaiser and the tough times that are happening right now, and there's an opportunity that we take it. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah. Did you have a question, Council President Starr?
No, ma'am, I was just agreeing that I would
Okay.
love to show up and tell them to, don't raise our rate. Yeah, exactly.
Ms. Christopher?
So where did we come up with, where did they come up with 5%? And is that an indexed fund? Why isn't that an indexed fund? And is that potentially something that absolutely we could propose that to them. They're not gonna like that. But, and to your point, Councilor Cross, yeah, we can scream and yell all they want, but they're in charge of that. It's their water treatment plant. And so we're always going to be, but I don't think that should stop us. I think that we should stand up for our Kaiser residents, and I think it should be an indexed fund. And you said the CPI is going at 2.6? Is that what you said? 3.6? What was it?
Well, the CPI that we look at is specific to labor.
I know, but just as an overall, that gives you an indicator.
Sure.
I mean, we had some 8% years, then we had some 5% years. Now it's 2.6%, and they're increasing it by 5? Come on.
Well, I think
And Salem doesn't have the best reputation for being able to balance a budget. Last I heard, they were 15 million in the red. So, we're not going to get very far, but I think our Kaiser residents deserve to be fought for and bring these points up and talk about indexing that fund. I'm done.
Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To bring all this to a head, there were 8 meetings that we went to, and some of the meetings didn't affect Kaiser at all. Some of it was just what they're doing with their water, what they're doing with the water distribution, this point and that point, and how they're doing all that. But when it came to the sewer stuff, we were pretty attentive of what was going on. And they wanted 15%. And I think they pretty much wanted to do that. I mean, the staff recommended 5, but there were people in that room that said,
Balancing the budget.
we want more. We have to make sure that we have enough. Well, contingency fund, we might have to do something sometime. But we kind of tricked them into just doing the 5. And it was kind of fun, actually. But the other point is that recommendation from that task force gave numbers to the Salem City Council that they're voting on tonight they don't have to accept that. They can make it 8 or 10% and we won't, there's nothing we can do about it.
I think, thank you for keeping us aware of that. Traditionally, I'm going to look at Mr. Wood, when the recommendation has come from the task force, in your experience, have they pretty much adopted that? I understand that the caveat that they've got some issues, and I think it's general fund. This is an enterprise fund, so what is in the sewer stays in the sewer as far as money goes.
Ooh, that stinks.
It doesn't have an enterprise
You're
fund.
welcome.
They can't steal that money.
It is, it's an enterprise fund.
That is correct, and at least in all the time I've been involved, they've always accepted the recommended rate increases from the task force.
So we'll have to watch for the vote tonight.
I know.
Okay. Appreciate that. Counselor Cross?
I would say that there's a whole different kind of counts over there right now, so I wouldn't say just because of history that that's going to happen again. Somebody could put it off 6 months, so that's what I would say to that. So again, I understand what you're saying, Counselor Kohler, but when we have an opportunity to speak, or maybe a couple of us to go, it's worth it.
Okay, we'll watch for the scheduling in 2 years and make a point of that our representatives from the task force are able to be at the council meeting, because Salem's council meetings and ours offset. We meet first, third, they meet second, fourth Mondays. That's a good recommendation.
Yeah.
We have to be at the table, all the tables. All right, thank you very much.
Well, that was fun,
And that is why we're here, to have these
right?
kind of conversations.
So moving on to intergovernmental, this is always my favorite, liquor and cigarettes and opioids and all kinds of fun stuff. So liquor tax is really down this year. My guess is it probably has more to do with timing at the state of when they distribute the funds. It can vary based off of the month. Hopefully, once we get another quarter behind us, I would anticipate it would level out, because I can't imagine a 34% decrease in drinking. But
Certainly not.
it does not make any sense at all.
Not this year, doesn't.
Nope. Nothing as far as the revenue sharing, that's a quarterly payment, so we're gonna see that in October. And again, that's tied to liquor sales, primarily. Opioid settlement, this is a wild card still. We have 10 to 12 different agreements that we're trying to manage, as far as timing of when we receive dollars. And with those, the pharmaceutical people, they can make a annual payment. They can make multiple annual payments in the same year. I haven't quite figured out a method to the madness as far as when we receive those dollars. At this point, we have collected $176,000 and we have not spent any of it. The plan, as far as the budget committee process goes, is that we're using that for some police staffing. So we're still kind of waiting to get police up to speed, and then we'll start spending some of those dollars. Cigarette taxes.
I'm sorry, okay. Okay, I'm going to go to Ms. Wilson and then Counselor Cross. Did you have a question? Okay, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Woods, when we are talking about, going from 83,000 to 54,000, sounds like a lot. Is it possible that people are not shopping in Kaiser? When we talk about the liquor, the revenue going down, is it possible that?
I believe that one's statewide.
Okay.
So not specific. Kaiser Liquor Store has been pretty busy. Just saying.
How do you know that?
We support local. Stand by.
So we're holding our own.
I think we're holding our own, yes. So moving on to opioid.
Hang on, I've got to.
Again, kind of wonky.
Before we go on, I'm going to go to Mrs. Dahlheim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But yeah, in all seriousness, is that more of a change in tax or just local demand?
I think it's just timing at the state. If they get turnover in a key position there, whoever fills that spot may or may not get the taxes filed on time, so.
We don't know, is it?
Yeah, I think we need to wait probably another quarter before we can really see how that plays out.
Okay, thank you.
5. Thank you very much on that.
Cigarette tax, we typically budget a 5 to 10% decline. It actually looks like it's dropping a lot quicker than that. The consistent trend you can see at the graph has been going down for at least 10, if not 15 to 20 years. So the other,
Mr. Wood, Mr. Brown?
I think a key point to mention about that too is that the state has preempted any local tax on vaping. And we're seeing a reduction in cigarette, which we can tax, but an increase in vaping across the state.
And then vaping is taxed, but we do not receive revenue sharing from it? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
That's fabulous. All right. Yep. Okay.
so
Mr. Wood.
the other column, that is, other row, the significant decrease is because in the previous year, we received some OEM funds related to the ice storm. And if you recall, the ice storm was many years ago. That's how long it takes to get money out of OEM. So
OEM is?
Oregon Emergency Management.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what was it, like 3 years?
It was in 2021.
Yeah, okay.
I remember it well. 12 days, some of the people were out of power. That was, yeah, that was a long haul. Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Wood, before we move on from this slide, did I hear you correctly that I can go home and tell my wife I need the more expensive bourbon because it's for my city?
Yes.
And Tim said it was okay?
Pull one for the team,
All right.
please.
And I'll see you at the liquor store.
This is not going well for me. Moving on.
Jonathan, I'm sure you can tell her that, but she probably won't believe you.
Probably not.
And if you do get the good stuff, if you do get the good stuff, I'll be over later.
All right, party of Johnsons.
Moving on to fines and forfeitures. This is primarily municipal court revenue. Unfortunately, with the limited staffing in the police department, traffic is one of the first areas that gets impacted. We have to pull those folks off to respond to patrol, service calls, that kind of a thing. So you're seeing a little bit of the downhill trend just because of lack of traffic safety staffing.
But we're hiring. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure if this is going to go to Mr. Wood or if this goes to Chief. But when we are, let's assume we're fully staffed in our traffic unit, I would assume that our officers do a good job of educating, right, when they do traffic stops, right? Then if they get maybe some, I don't know, repeat customers that didn't fully attend class to understand laws in our city, they would write a ticket, yes? And then those customers would come to court, to municipal court, yes?
That is correct.
So then when the judge, the municipal judge is hearing those cases, is there a connection or a disconnect perhaps between the judge recognizing that our officers have attempted to do a good job of educating and only write tickets when they feel it's necessary? And are those tickets getting dismissed at court? Or is he upholding the officers' due diligence and good work in writing those citations when they feel it's only necessary? So what I'm trying to get to is, is there a revenue disconnect there?
I don't think so, not necessarily. It is a case-by-case basis, but we don't get a lot of citations dismissed. He'll do a reduced fine based on the person and history, driving history, that type of stuff. That's the biggest difference in a fine being actually on the piece of paper than actually fined in court, so.
Is reducing the fine.
Is reduced, and he has state authority to only go so low on each citation. So he can't just say, oh, it's $5 today. He has to follow state guidelines.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, did you have something to add?
And this is information only, but yeah, there's a presumptive fine per type of charge. and the judge is really limited to being within 20% of that. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Good question. All right. Mr. Wood?
When we look at general fund expenses, predominantly the expenses in the general fund are labor-related, police being the biggest piece. So it's not surprising that it's pretty level as we go throughout the year. You can see July, August, September, we are behind our 3-year average. And again, that's almost entirely staffing related, just being down the police officer bodies. So that'll eventually catch itself up once we're back up to full staffing.
Okay.
Doing a little bit deeper dive, when we look at the personnel services, you can see that across the board we're down. That really has more to do with timing than anything specific. With the first payroll that was paid out in July 1st or 2nd, I can't remember what day it was, all of that really was attributed to the previous year. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a decrease across the board. However, the police being down 15% really is that 4 to 5 bodies that we're currently missing. When we look at materials and services, really not a lot to talk about. We did do the breakout of the transient occupancy this go around. So once we get to this time next year, you'll have a comparable for that. We have spent just about all of the budgeted dollars for that category because they were mostly just budget allocations to different entities. So with that,
Okay.
we can move on to the enterprise funds. This includes water, sewer, stormwater. You can see total resources at $3,766,000. That's very comparable to the previous year. What we're kind of seeing is the annualized impact of the rate increases from January 1, 2024, offset by people really conserving water, that kind of a thing. So we're going to probably end the year pretty well flat with the previous year. As far as the expenditures go, during the first quarter, we had $2,494,000. So we're actually showing a profit of $1,272,000. And that's what's offsetting the general fund loss when we look at the consolidated picture. For this, again, there is some seasonal impacts, especially as we look at capital outlay with water, sewer, stormwater. We do have a timing where we typically don't see a lot of improvements this time of year. However, when we get to the next 2 quarters, that's when you're really going to see a lot of the capital outlay start to happen. So,
Stand by. Ms. Christopher?
So will that eat up the $1.3 million?
that will get us pretty close to eating it up, yes.
So it's really
Well-
not, we're really not over. We're just in a lull period
Correct. It's just timing right now.
because Bill doesn't want to get in the rain.
Well, I don't know about that.
He sends other guys out.
Yeah, the other area where we've been down as far as expenses go, if you look at the personal services line, during this first quarter, we spent $511,000 compared to the $664 in the previous year. That really is the environmental group that we're missing for the first quarter as well. The other thing I want to point out, the transfers out line, which is right above the total expenditures. As you look through time, 22, 23, we had budgeted $650,000. Last year was $600,000, and this year is $500,000. That's really showing our limited ability to do some of our capital improvements. So as that line starts to go down, that's really the dollars that we're moving to our water facility fund for capital outlay. So our current rate structure isn't keeping up as well as we would like. If we end up doing another rate structure or a master plan, we'll have to address that as far as how we're going to address that into the future.
Okay. Any questions on these 3 enterprise funds? And just for folks watching at home, the capital outlay, those are the projects that were identified during our budget process, by and large. Sometimes projects are added during the year as become necessary. I'm looking at mostly at Mr. Lawyer. So you gave the list of projects that are going to be under construction this year for these, three funds. So we pretty much know what's coming unless Mother Nature or technology throws a little curveball at us. Is that correct? Okay. Anything else? Okay, moving on from enterprise.
So moving on to citywide projects, we've got a lot going on. For a city with 100 employees, I'm just kind of amazed when we start looking at some of these projects that we're doing and our status. So police vehicles, we had some grant-funded ones that are here, we're able to drive them. As I indicated before, we completed the pickleball courts. Kaiser Rapids Park Turf Fields Phase 1 is done. Internally, we migrated our email to the cloud as part of our cybersecurity improvements. So that is done. Our routine street resurfacing project is done for the year. So those are the ones that we can claim victory for right now. Over the next quarter, 2 quarters, we have a lot more in process. Police have some more vehicles on order, and I think we're going to start seeing them show up in the near future. Public Works vehicles, I believe they're showing up this week, at least a couple of them. Phone system upgrade, we're about a month out, and then we'll be completely done with that project. The phone system was one of the few things that we actually carried over from the old building, back when we were old building. So we've gotten about 20 years use out of our phone system, so the upgrade was much needed. We have police body cameras in process. We're waiting on some grant funding to move forward with that. License plate reader cameras, we have a few in place, and we're getting more up over the next month or so. Park cameras, we have the infrastructure ready to go, and I think we're going to start hanging them in the parks next week. Today? First one went up today, so.
Today. Uh-huh. Yes, indeed.
City-owned property improvement acquisitions, we have a few things in the works that should come to fruition hopefully by the end of the year, end of the calendar year.
What is that?
We have some properties that we need to push some dirt around, and then we're also looking at a couple acquisitions. I'm not sure if we can exactly go public with them just yet. Codification.
I think one of them, just to interrupt, I think one of them, though, we just did approve, that was the one over by Clyde Creek Park. That's one of the acquisitions that we're doing. It's that $50,000 for that floodplain area, on the north side of Chumalo Road. So would that be included in that? Because that's still in progress.
That one, we have that one.
It's in Parks Fund.
Yeah, I believe that's in the Parks Fund. So yeah, we've actually paid for that, so yeah.
One of the ones in here is the Rawlings property, where we want to remove some of that soil to make it more marketable.
Okay. Awesome.
So the codification should be wrapped up hopefully by the end of the year. I think we're going to have some stuff coming in December for the city council to look at. The human resource information system payroll upgrade, we're scheduled to go live January 1st with that. The event center, we're looking at getting all new chairs. If you sat in the chairs over there, they could leave a little bit to be desired. That's going to be a January, March time period. We want to get through the holiday season, and then away we go with that. We have a few projects that are in the design phase, so that's really working with our engineer, architect kind of folks. Water line replacement project, that's something we do every year. Pick out a certain part of the city and do that. Bob Newton Family Park redevelopment, we're going to be working on that design work. Kaiser Rapids Park Turf Fields Phase 2, we're doing design work on that now. And the Claggett Creek Wetland Enhancement Project, that's also in design. The street improvements, which is our normal routine kind of thing, we just haven't started just because of the timing of when we typically do those projects. And that's where we're kind of at, so we're going to have a lot that's going to get completed in the next quarter or two, so.
I'm going to go with Ms. Martin and then Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a question about the Kaiser Rapids Park. When do we expect to start seeing the revenue to pay for the construction costs and as well as the additional maintenance costs that it's going to cost the city to maintain this park?
Well, right now, the plan, excuse me, is to right now, we currently have a short-term agreement with a group called Kaiser Community Fields to manage and operate that facility. Any rental revenue, any money charged to rent that facility goes to them, and they will maintain and take care of the facility. Working toward a long-term agreement, city managers met with them a few times, that will be in place hopefully right soon after the first of the year. That will, not sure how long that agreement will be, but it will outline the operation of that facility, and they will be responsible, at least that's what we're trying to put together, for all costs associated with the operation and maintenance of that facility. That's the initial discussions, and that includes money toward a sinking fund for replacement of the turf after about 10 years. Again, that's all being worked on in discussions, an agreement to be presented to the city council for consideration.
Follow-up?
What are we looking at as far as like, if it's not a satisfactory, or we don't have, is there a lot of interest? Are you seeing a lot of interest in somebody coming in and taking over that?
Yes, we have been so far, yes. They're very excited about it. They're very upbeat and positive that they can have a facility that operates and is self-sufficient without any city monies being needed to operate and maintain. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Council President Starr, and then I'll go to Ms. Herb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know if this is to Mr. Brown or to Mr. Lawyer, so you guys can flip a coin and see who gets to answer that. But the street improvement routine, I have kind of a two-part question. I'd like to know what that includes. And then I just have a follow-up question about the manholes in the middle of the roads that keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Okay.
And when are those getting fixed?
Well, the street, the name on there is a little bit misleading. Street improvements, that's our annual resurfacing project that we just completed for this summer, okay?
Okay, because it says not yet started.
That's right. We haven't started, we've selected the streets for next summer's resurfacing.
For the next summer.
Right. We
Okay.
haven't even really started on design on that yet.
So that would
okay?
be in next year's budget.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
As far as the manholes go, as I mentioned, we just finished this year's project. I know what the numbers are now, the final numbers are. I've been out for 3 weeks, so I haven't seen that yet today. Today is my first day back. I believe there's money available, about $50,000 left in that, from that line item to put toward manhole repairs. And my staff have identified, I think Mike told me 29 of them. He's got a list of.
Oh, I have a list too.
Well, 29 is not going to cover everything, I'll tell you right now. That's not going to get everything. He's focusing on the high traffic, the major arterials, Lock Haven, River Road, those streets.
Right.
We've been waiting to know what the final resurfacing number is, so we know how much money is available. We're there. We'll put together a package very soon, get it out for bids, and see what we can do to get those taken care of.
Great, thank you.
bet.
Mr. Lord, could you just explain what's happening there?
The manholes?
Yeah, for everybody else to say.
When we resurface high-volume streets, River Road, Cherry Avenue, Lock Haven, those kind of roads, our process is to go along. We have to remove some of the asphalt initially. In order to do that, you have to lower the manholes out of the way. Dig them up, lower them down so the grinder can come along and grind the asphalt, because the grinder doesn't get along with steel at all, okay? So the process is lower the manholes, pave the road, go back, cut a hole in that brand-new road over that manhole, and bring the manhole back up to grade. What we've found out, and it doesn't matter who the contractor was for the paving or their sub, doesn't matter who it is, the grade rings and the concrete that they've used to set those manhole rims to grade are failing. And so we have researched and come up with a different specification for the grade rings and the concrete to be used so that they won't fail. I'm not going to say they won't ever fail. They won't fail to the degree they have been in the past in the future, and that's what we're putting together.
Great, thank you for putting in the extra work to figure out how to hopefully prevent it as much as possible in the future. Appreciate that. Thank you.
It's very frustrating for us and the public as well that when they start failing, they fail fast. And and they fail bad. And Shamar Road North is another example. Those are 15 years old, and they were good for a while, and now they're not. So we're working on a process and a specification that will hopefully make those last a lot longer than they have, so.
Thank you. Great information. Ms. Herb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a follow-up from what Ms. Martin was asking you. Can you explain a little bit of the structure of that agreement with a third party? How does the city, they pay us to have that contract and then they get to keep all the money, or do we pay them to do it? I just need, I would love a little more detail. I know you can't probably give figures, but.
At this point, the structure of the agreement is that the city will spend no money, that they will operate the facility, generate an adequate revenue to operate, maintain the facility, pay all the bills, the power bill, the sewer bill when there's one, the water bill, garbage, all that stuff, and put aside, give the city annually money for the sinking fund for turf replacement, okay? The goal and the outlook, and this is talking with them, and they believe it's achievable, is that they will generate enough revenue, renting of the facility, that they will fund all of that, and the city won't have to spend any money on it, okay? That's the goal. Now, it's new. We all know that. It's new. Time will tell if that goal is achievable or not.
Okay, so just one last thing. So we're never going to get an ROI on the $8 million that we're spending to make this project happen. It's only for the ongoing maintenance. So that outlay of $8 million is just gone. We're not going to get any of that return on the investment at all. Is that what I'm understanding?
Depends on how you look at it, okay? And I mean, really, if you want a facility that is affordable for the public to use, to rent a facility like that, if the city's gonna run it, it can't be self-sustaining. Our labor costs are prohibitively expensive. We could not set a rate structure up that would be palatable and acceptable for the public to pay the fees necessary to make it self-sufficient, okay? By having a volunteer group operate the facility, their staffing costs are much less, one, because I just said volunteers, okay? So they don't have the overhead and labor costs, so they can generate enough revenue, keeping the rates low to make it a self-sufficient facility. So the return on the investment is the availability for that facility to be used by the public. There's a return in that, okay? Is it going to be a financial recoup? No. And the only way you would ever do that is if the fees were high enough, which would not be acceptable, because it'd be probably $125 an hour at a minimum. That's not acceptable. I mean, we know that. That's about the only way you could look at that and get a return, monetary return on your investment.
Thank you. Ms. Christopher, and Counselor Kohler, and then Mr. Thompson.
So the other thing is, Jane, is if they are as successful as they say they are, then that will bring visitors and tournaments into town. That does create a return on that investment. And that does make a difference to local businesses that are hiring local people, that are selling local goods. So in that regard, anything that we are able to do that will bring folks into the city certainly helps our local businesses.
The hell? Counselor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in addition to that, there'll be people that stay at hotels, which brings in additional TOT dollars and a bunch of other things. But the other thing that I see, and I always try to look at, is that if we have young people engaged in wholesome activities, then they're not out tagging things, they're not out trying to find out what they can do to get in trouble. There are less of them that are in jail, less of them that are doing things that they shouldn't be, and we have a better community. So that's the $8 million investment as far as I'm concerned.
It's a lifestyle, it's amenities that the city wants to provide to make it a wonderful place to live.
Yes. There are some monies that come in, but that's not the biggest thing to me.
I'm going to go with Mr. Lawyer, and then I'll come back to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And
Those were great points.
Councilor Kohler's comment made me think of this. Most park amenities are not, you don't get a return on your investment. I mean, the big toy, Yeah, it was built by volunteers, but there was a fair amount of money spent on that. There's no return on the investment other than the public enjoyment, and that means a lot. Livability of a city means a lot. So the return on your investment in a park setting typically is not monetary. It's livability, it's public, pleasing the public, those kind of things. And that's park system wide. Pickleball courts, big toy, playgrounds at the parks, skate park. I mean, I can just keep going. And that's the return is the livability of the community, not money, so.
Mr. Thompson?
They made my points more eloquently than I would.
What they said?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else on these projects? What's coming up? And it's also a great heads up to people in the community if they see work being done out in the community, stuff that has been done and will be coming up. It's good to know. It's good to know what our city is doing for our community and what to expect, especially if there's going to be things around street improvements and so forth. As a final note on the projects, the Verta project is not shown here. This is under the transportation fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the street fund.
Okay.
And grant funding through SCATS as well, yes.
Right. So that's a big project that's coming up in the spring for, no, it's not.
26,
It's been put out another year?
yes. Not, well, it's been actually extended a couple months, okay? But it gets it into 26, and the reason for that is I asked them, ODOT, to extend the bid date a few months to give me a chance to build up some more funding for matching for the additional funding to get the project built. I needed 2 budget cycles, and without them extending the bid date like 2 months, I only had 1.
Gotcha.
So, construction is spring 26.
So fiscal year 26 or calendar year 26, or both?
It will start in fiscal year 26 and finish in calendar year 26, if all goes well,
Got it.
okay?
Yes. So
And
after, sometime
I
after
have to
July 1.
qualify those statements. That's federal fiscal year, not city fiscal year.
Oh,
Okay, because the federal fiscal year is what they're working on,
September.
okay? And I had
October.
to adjust their bidding date within the federal fiscal year program to give myself another city budget cycle to put some money aside to pay the extra funds we need to complete the project.
got you. And federal fiscal year begins on October 1,
Correct.
which is different from the city. Okay. Ms. Christopher?
I was just going to say, as we're coming to a close, there's sandwiches in the back of the room that are left over. If y'all don't take one, I'll take them to Somonka. But if you want, I think there's turkey ham, I don't know what it is. It's left over from the Chamber of Commerce today. So if you would like one, please take one. And maybe 2, one for your wife.
Mr. Brown?
The last thing I would mention on the capital projects is that since the Budget Committee last met, we received notification from Oregon Parks and Recreation Department that we received the $634,000 matching grant for Phase 2 of the turf field. So we're looking at, we have that, our side of it budgeted. So we're looking at, it's in final design right now, and we're just waiting on the intergovernmental agreement, and then we can go out for bid.
So that's going to be exciting to see the continued build out of the turf field project area. So that is a fantastic effort, and thank you to everybody who was involved in that grant. So Mr. Brown and team, everybody involved. Anything else? Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of you may or may not know that I am a licensed insurance agent in addition to being a licensed undertaker. And so I thought I would share with you a claim form that was recently sent in. It says, I'm writing in response to your request for additional information. In block number 3 of the accident reporting form, I put down poor planning as the cause of my accident. You said in your letter that I should explain more, and I trust the following details will be sufficient. I'm a bricklayer by trade. On the day of the accident, I was working alone on a roof of a new 6-story building. When I completed my work, I discovered that I had about 500 pounds of bricks left over. Rather than carry the bricks down by hand, I decided to lower them in a barrel by using a pulley, which fortunately was attached to the side of the building at the 6th floor. Securing the rope at the ground level, I went up and to the roof and swung the barrel out and loaded the bricks into the barrel. Then I went back to the ground and untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure a slow descent of the 500 pounds of brick. You will note in block 11 of the accident reporting form that I weigh 135 pounds. Due to my surprise at being jerked off the ground so suddenly, I lost my presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded at a rather rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explains the fractured skull and broken collarbone. Slowed only slightly, I continued my rapid ascent, not stopping until the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep into the pulley. Fortunately, by this time, I had regained my presence of mind and was able to hold tightly onto the rope in spite of my pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground, and the bottom fell out of the barrel. Devoid of the weight of the bricks, the barrel now weighs approximately 50 pounds. I refer again to my weight in block number 11. As you might imagine, I began a rapid descent down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I again met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the 2 fractured ankles and lacerations of my legs and lower body. The encounter with the barrel slowed me enough to lessen my injuries when I fell under the pile of bricks. Unfortunately, only 3 vertebrae were cracked. I'm sorry to report, however, as I lay there on the bricks in pain, unable to move, and watching the barrel 6 stories up, I again lost presence of mind and let go of the rope. So, it's not a dad joke, but there you go.
Okay, I was waiting for the moral of the story.
I was waiting for the more.
Yeah.
I can see my previous time with
All right. Well, thank you for all being part of really good planning. Mr. Wood.
Just final words again. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yep.
This is the first time we've actually done this kind of a process, so if you have additional feedback, I'd be happy to take it to make this a better process going forward. Thank you.
Thank you all for asking for this additional process. I think it's been a great conversation, and it's going to be great getting out into the community. Appreciate all of your work, and of course, we'll wish everybody a very happy holiday season. We will see this task force together again in February. Anything else for the good of the order? The time is, oh, I'm sorry?
That's okay. I could remind everybody that we've got the little birthday party coming up on Friday, 4 to 6. You've seen the art piece, and we had Leadership Kaiser at the Cultural Center today, so they have seen the Kaiser display. So that'll be available to everybody Friday, 4 to 6. The actual presentation by Tammy Wild will be at 5:30.
All right. Thank you much. The time is 7:37. We are adjourned.